And inflation. No, but no, yes, there's deflation in this. Okay, so let me bring it back up. Yeah, yeah, about 3,000 years, a little more. So Abraham's servant Eliezer sent to Haran, which is in Turkey, with gifts in order to find a wife for Isaac, who was then 37 years old. At the village well, Eliezer asks God for a sign, and it says that this is Eliezer, the Abraham's chief of staff. When he says, when the maidens come to the well, he's going to ask for some water to drink. The woman who offers to give his camels water to drink as well should be the one destined for master's son. He's looking for someone kind in a very cruel pagan world. So he says, "I'll give you drink, and I care about your animals too." And that's what happens. Rebecca, the daughter of Abraham's nephew Pesuel, appears at the well and passes the test. So this is Abraham's great niece. Eliezer is invited to their home, where he preached the story of the day's events. Rebecca returns with Eliezer to the land of Canaan, which is Israel, where they encounter Isaac praying in the field. Isaac marries Rebecca, his cousin, loves her, and is comforted over the loss of his mother. Abraham, since Sarah has passed away, takes a new wife, and then we're going to deal with this, Keturah Hagar, and he fathers 6 additional sons. So after the huge miracle of having Isaac, he's able to have 6 more sons. But Isaac is designated as his only heir. As far as the assets, they go to his child with Sarah, not with his child with Hagar earlier, who was Ishmael, and not with the 6 later. Abraham dies at age 175, and his 2 eldest sons, Isaac and Ishmael, bury Abraham next to Sarah. Okay, so now let's stop this for a second. We're going to start exploring what the Torah tells us about this third marriage, or significant relationship, where he has 6 extra sons. And that kind of often gets lost in the overall story of Abraham and Sarah. Like, we don't teach the Torah kids in Hebrew school, and it doesn't take up much space in the Torah at all. But there is some discussion of it. And there's a rabbinic discussion of it. And we're going to explore some of the significance of what this is. So I want to back this up a little bit and tell you that, I grew up in a Chabad home, going to a Jewish day school, which was not Chabad. It was what we'd call today modern Orthodox. But I grew up in a pretty much Orthodox world, even if it wasn't strictly Chabad learning. And the people I grew up with on my block were mostly Jews. I was the only observant one on my block, but there were a lot of Jews, and then there were non-Jews, and we played together. We did our thing. I never experienced any like religious conflict or strife or anything like that, and that's the way I was raised. Everybody, come in and out of each other's houses. Obviously, I can't eat by in a non-kosher home, but there was none of this the conflict one might think. I used to go very often in to visit my grandparents in Borough Park, and my cousin, my aunt and uncle, and my cousins, who are Hasidic, not of the Chabad stripe. They're wonderful, wonderful people. But I got a taste for the Borough Park, very, very sheltered, let's call it, or very orthodox thinking, which I respect and respected. One thing that, in retrospect, always bothered me was if they would, in speaking about a non-Jew, it wasn't horrible and harsh and or discriminatory in a way, but it was always the other. And it was always this us, and then there's them. And the them is probably a little bit lower. And it wasn't my experience in West Orange, because that's not the way I was raised. It's, my friends, Danny Raimondi was a friend, and then he came by. The fact that he was Catholic, it just didn't make a difference to much. I just know I couldn't eat in his house. He could eat in my house, but it was just it really wasn't a big issue. So when I was 15, I remember the Rebbe spoke about, and I mentioned it before, but the Rebbe spoke at a very public gathering. It was his birthday, right before Passover, and there were thousands of people there. And he started to speak about the idea that Torah is given to the Jewish people, but it's not only for the Jewish people. The Torah is designed for humanity. And someone not Jewish need not convert in order to be an actualized human being as God wants that person to be. Because if God had wanted them to be Jewish, God would have probably made them Jewish. So the idea that the Rebbe was, and I remember this is one of those watershed moments in my life because it felt very good to hear it from him. What the Rebbe was saying is that every single person is created by God. So far, therefore, every single person is precious to God. Every single person has the capacity for a truly meaningful life. A Jew as a Jew, a non-Jew as a non-Jew. And the Torah lays out a path for the non-Jew to find a meaningful life without being Jewish. As a matter of fact, if a non-Jew comes and says, I want to be Jewish, the first thing I do by Torah law, not because I'm liberal and inclusive and all of that stuff, the first thing I would say is, have you tried Millington Baptist? They're wonderful people there. I know the pastors. I can make an introduction, not because I don't want them here, and not because I somehow think they're lesser than because they're not Jewish or whatever it is. It's because I'm we're thinking about what's their soul's journey, and if they're not Jewish, why would they be coming here? They can find God over there at Millington Baptist or at a mosque. Again, assuming the mosque doesn't teach them to saw off people's heads. So, or assuming obviously the church also, there's a morality. We're talking about connecting with God. So there is, although there is the concept of conversion, which I'm not going to get into now, and it does exist, and it is a kosher idea, it's an anomaly. The main thing that struck me and resonated with me as this sounds so true is that the Rebbe was saying, when I see the non-Jew on my block, and he's not Jewish, and he doesn't believe in what I consider to be the truth, that it doesn't mean that there's anything lesser in him. And if my friend Danny Raimondi is going to Catholic Church and he's believing in God or praying to God and living his life according to the way we say, basically not doing damage and raping, pillaging, stealing, all that stuff, he's good. And therefore, I'm doing my thing to achieve actualization. He's doing his thing to achieve actualization. To me, as a 15-year-old, it really made me feel very good about that perspective on the world and feeling like I'm plugging into this perspective. It resonated with my soul. Not that I was the Torah scholar to say what was right, what was wrong. I said it didn't feel godly to just think that we're right, they're wrong, which may be true, but the idea is they're lesser than. So because the idea is that everybody who has a belief system, a theological belief system, generally thinks this is true. Someone who doesn't believe in the belief system is therefore not plugging into truth. So my friends across the street who are, and they are friends and they're very good to us, the fact that I don't accept Jesus in their eyes means I'm making a mistake. I'm wrong. It also means, and I joke with them about it sometimes, that they think I'm going to hell, which I don't like it between us, but I get it. I think in theological systems, I guess that's usually a given, but in Judaism, it's not that way. Because if they're sitting here and they do believe in Jesus, and I don't think that going to hell is whatever it is. It means they're not. It doesn't mean that they're not leading a life tapping into God and godliness and a soul life going forward, even post life. That's what Judaism believes, and Judaism has fundamentally believed that if we're talking about the journey of the soul and an afterlife or higher life, it's for Jew and non-Jew. To me, I need to put on tefillin. But for this person who's not Jewish, it's like, why do you do that? It's not there for you, but I'll tell you how. So fundamentally, and we're going to explore this here, Judaism believes, yes, the Torah that God gave the Torah to us at Mount Sinai, which Christianity and Islam also believe. But it gave to us, but not only for us. It's actually our mission to help the world come to God consciousness. That's a Jewish mission. And Maimonides writes that explicitly, that it's up to us to influence the world for God consciousness.
Okay, now,
Yeah,
going back several minutes,
go ahead.
were you talking about the process of conversion?
I really wasn't, because I didn't want to get into that.
You were.
I mentioned it, yeah.
In the sense that, as a rabbi,
Yeah.
it is your responsibility not to discourage, but to invite the possible convert to look at several other options.
It is actually my responsibility to discourage,
right,
and to look but to direct them to other places to find God. But yeah, God, yeah.
Okay. Now, if God has given us the Torah to share, to spread to the world, how does this compare with I wouldn't say, with the inhibition against basically proselytizing?
So it's like this. God created a world with different soul types. Each soul type, think about it, let's go back for a second. One person is born with a sensitivity to glucose. Another person is born with we have different characters. For some, dairy, I forgot what the language, it works, and some it doesn't. There are different soul types, and basically breaks down into two in this sense. There's Jewish and non-Jewish. The non-Jewish soul needs a certain program in order to actualize its meaning in life. The non-Jewish soul has a different path that it needs for life. So for me to tell a non-Jew, in other words, someone who's born from a non-Jewish mother, to non-Jew to say, oh, come in, look, and we could put on tefillin, I might be doing something which is contrary to his soul's needs. Why would I do that? I'm not doing him any favors. I'm doing him a favor by connecting him with God. Now, if this person is insistent, saying, I want to be Jewish, or he's married to a Jew, or whatever, or his father was Jewish, and he wants, I mean, there are different ways. Then rabbis say, go easy. Then let it go. Fine, if someone wants to become. So there's such a thing as the convert, where there's this what's seen as a Jewish spark that's embedded in non-Jewish soul, which we can unlock. But I didn't want to get into that for today. But generally speaking, is like, why would I encourage someone to take a spiritual diet that's not for their condition? And that's more or less the way we look at it. Leon, you were asking a question.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. So the question I have is, why could we as Jews then not teach them Noahide laws and teach that program to them rather than direct them to other religious structures?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the Rebbe actually launched this idea of us going teaching Noahide laws. And we were doing it. And it drove the observant world crazy. this was in 1983 it started. There were Chabad students going into the hills of West Virginia to speak to non-Jews about the 7 Noahide laws connecting with God. For non-Chabad rabbis, they thought that was insane. They really couldn't complain much because the Rabbi said, "Not me, it's Maimonides," but it blew their minds. But you're right, Leon. The thing is, since for me, I don't have a program to be able to teach them. Of course, I'll tell them about the 7 Noahide laws, but if they're going to the Baptist church, that the principles of the Baptist church, they follow the 7 Noahide laws. I just want this person to understand this is what came from through Moses at Sinai, and he can get it over there. Maimonides writes and he asks, how is it that if we have this belief system, why did God give so much success in marketing to the Christians and the Muslims? And Maimonides answers that they were very effective conduits to reach the non-Jewish world with the idea of faith in God and the 7 Noahide laws. So it actually, a Baptist church is probably a little bit safer for me to send to. Catholic church. Some opinions would say it goes a little bit more closer to idolatry, but that's not even that. I wouldn't take that opinion. And Islam is definitely not idolatry, but now it's just dangerous in other ways, many ways. What? Greek Orthodox is similar to Catholic, but the consensus of Jewish law is that it's fine for someone to go to a Catholic church, non-Jew to go to a Catholic church. Okay, so now let's get into thanks for asking. Okay, so now we're going to go into the Torah portion. Share. Okay, so in this week's Torah portion, Abraham marries Sarah, and most of the narrative spent on finding a wife for Yitzchak, for Isaac, and that's Rebecca, and the whole they get married. But then the Torah adds that Abraham then took another wife. Her name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimran, Yakshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shuach. Okay, 6 sons. And then the Torah goes further, 1b on 77. He gave everything he owned to Isaac. He wrote a will, and he said, I got a lot of assets. I'm giving it all to Isaac, my son with Sarah. But he has his 6 sons, who he had, and he loves them too. So to the concubine sons, Abraham gave gifts. He gave them. They got stuff that wasn't part of the estate. He gave them gifts, and as the rabbis tell us, also spiritual gifts and awareness and understanding of monotheism, and sent them away from his son Isaac during Isaac's lifetime to a land in the east. Sent them to the east. Now, we once had a speaker here who made a very interesting case for the touch points in Hinduism and Hindu language which point to Abraham, like Brahmin, for instance. There, he went through the idea that maybe that Abraham, even though we look at the Abrahamic religions of Abrahamic accords as being Judaism and offshoots, so to speak, of Christianity and Islam, it's that Abraham had children, sent them to the east, and those are the seeds, he said, of Hinduism too, whatever it may be. Why did he send them away? They were kids. And it seems like he wanted to make a distinction between them and Isaac, but he didn't just throw them out, he gave them gifts. So, this is text 2, which is
78.
78 is correct. Okay. Abraham and Sarah were elderly. Going back a little bit. Want to look at when Sarah had given birth to Isaac, the lead up. They were old. One is Abraham is at that point 99. She's 89. And they had arrived with their days. In other words, getting old. The feminine cycle ceased for Sarah. And now God says you can have a child. So Sarah laughed inwardly. After I withered, will I be delicate again? And my master is old. In other words, Abraham's old. Well, we're done. God said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I give birth after I've aged? Is anything too wondrous for God? I will return at this time in a year when you're 100 and Sarah's 90, and Sarah will have a child. Now, it was wondrous that they have a baby. 37 years later, they have she's dead, but he's able to have 6 kids. Torah doesn't say one thing about it being a miracle. It just slides it in. After the big miracle of him of Isaac being born at age when Abraham is 100, when he's 137, they say at that point it wasn't one time, he has another 6 kids. He gets married, he has another 6 kids. So, and the Torah doesn't say, and that was a miracle, and whatever. Well, it doesn't say. Let's say she was younger, but still. Okay, but actually, there are commentators that say, well, doesn't it depend on him?
He wasn't a problem.
A woman in this room. Does it?
He wasn't a
Yes.
problem.
Sarah's birth was by divine intervention, and this.
Okay, but wouldn't you say that a 137-year-old man? I mean, if it was, we don't know much about how it was, how life was at that time, physical life. But Sarah wasn't just saying, "I can't have a kid." She was also saying, "Look at him. There's no way." Now he was much older. Why was that okay? How did that work? You're right. I hear what you're saying. But and there was divine intervention, and we're going to actually look at a few different ways of understanding what the difference was. If you look at text 3a, Nachmanides writes, I'm going to tell you something true and clear about the Torah. The Torah only mentions miracles that a prophet or an angel foretold. The Torah doesn't mention every miracle that occurred to assist a good person or punish a wicked person. Nachmanides says, it's a good question. Why do we make such a big deal out of Isaac's birth and nothing here decades later? Because it was not a history book. It tells us when there's something where there was a forecast, and it shows more about God's, it emphasized God's intervention in the world. That's where the Torah brings it up. Text 3b, another angle. No. Right. Although there was earlier Hagar, also not Jewish, and she had a birth with Ishmael. And that's, we read about a couple of weeks ago, and that was also considered miraculous, even though she was much younger, but he was old.
So in the introduction,
yeah,
they say Torah, and then in parentheses they say Hagar.
So
Same person?
some rabbis say it was the same person.
Oh.
That after Sarah died, he took her back. But either way, in Hagar's birth of Ishmael, there is a big deal made out of the wow, Abraham was able to have a child. Okay. Text 3b. Abraham was much older than he was at Isaac's birth. Nevertheless, this was not considered a miracle. Why? Because according to this commentary, once the door was opened for Isaac's birth and his body became capable of procreation despite his advanced age, remained that way for the rest of his life. He said, now, once God gave him back his freshness, 137 was the new 60. Okay, now, or text 3c, another angle. This is the Rabbi tells us a story here in his book. It says, during his visit to Jerusalem, this is much more contemporary, this went on in the 1900s, someone known as the Gerer Rebbe, Rabbi Avram Mordechai Alter of blessed memory, Rebbe of the Gur Hasidic dynasty, Gerer Hasidic, and the author of the book Imre Emet, was once relaxing on the rooftop of his lodgings on a hot summer day. And he said, Torah says, and Abram took another wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimra and Yakshan, all six. Before the birth of our patriarch Isaac of blessed memory, his parents, Abram and Sarah, underwent all kinds of difficulties, burdens, and suffering. They wanted their children. They had sufferings in general in life in their efforts at spreading monotheism. But they had this struggle with God. I just want to have children. However, Abraham married Keturah easily, with no obstacles after Sarah's passing, who was born a Zimran and a Yakshan. In other words, there were two, the rabbis tell us there were two idolatrous kids. This teaches us that marrying a child like Isaac doesn't come easily. So what this rabbi is saying is the reason the Isaac story took up so much space was because they suffered for it. They asked for it. They prayed for it. They anguished over having a child, and it was given to them. The situation with Keturah, it went through. It was miraculous. So God does miracles, but it wasn't put in the Torah because it didn't take up as much space because there wasn't so much a story of the human struggle. Okay, so whatever angle we take, we do have. The bottom line is that Abraham was able to have 6 kids afterwards, and he sent them off to the east. And it was obviously very unusual, but the Torah tells us about it, that they were there. Now, what does it teach us? Let's go to 4a. Let's go back to Sarah's birth. Her language was, Sarah said, God gave me a reason to rejoice. Everyone who hears about this will rejoice with me. What was that? Abraham and Sarah are two people spreading monotheism. God says, even though you're both old, I will give you, make a miracle, you'll be able to have a child. So first she laughs at it, so it doesn't make sense. And then she buys it, and she says, I'm going to call him Yitzchak, Isaac, because that means to laugh, to rejoice. That makes a lot of sense. Except the language is that everybody who hears about this is going to rejoice with me. First of all, why? Why is it everyone's business? Why do you care? And why is that such a big deal? You're going to be happy. You and Abraham and your family's going to be happy. Finally, you had a kid. You wanted a kid all these years. What's the element of other people rejoicing? And conceivably, other people rejoicing with me when she lives in a pagan culture means the pagans around me are going to also be happy. And if you look at text 4b, the bottom of 82, Rashi, primary commentary on the Torah, says, what do you mean will rejoice with me? He quotes the Talmud that says that when Sarah gave birth, many infertile women also gave birth alongside Sarah. Her miracle was a more collective one. Many ill people were cured on the day. Many prayers were answered alongside her prayer. Thus, there was much rejoicing. And what our rabbis tell us is the day of celebration for Abraham and Sarah and finally having a child was a day of celebration for a community. That was a day that healing came to the world. Their neighborhood, which was a pagan neighborhood, everybody was happy. Why? Why did God do that? We say that God doesn't make miracles, unless there's a significant reason. Why did God need this to be not just a local, beautiful, and a Jewish in the forerunners of the Jewish people, Abraham and Sarah, that there was going to be this incredible miracle and gift, that now there would be posterity for this monotheism. Abraham and Sarah's line would go forward and would be our people, the Hebrews. God made a miracle that the whole neighborhood was healed. And now everybody says, whoa, this is incredible. And everybody's happy. Why? What does that bring to the table? It's nice. We're happy for everybody. But why would God do that? And the answer we're going to talk about is that the way the Torah presents the birth of Isaac and Abraham's children, even post Sarah, was that it wasn't just about birthing the Hebrew people, the Jewish people. And that's our point. It was about bringing the gift of monotheism to the world. We were created from the beginning. We were designed from the beginning to be a people of universal clout. That being Jewish and following Abraham and Sarah and following Torah was insufficient. We needed to have a fingerprint on the rest of the world and saying, there's God. We're all alive. We're the family of humanity. We're all created for a purpose. You're going to find that purpose in the mosque? Mazel tov. You're going to go in the church? Great. We all have a God. The idea was there is a collective nature to this, which we find in when Sarah says, everybody's going to rejoice with me. Why should everybody rejoice with me? Everybody's going to rejoice with me because God made the day my miracle, everybody miracles. But why? Why? Because the idea was to bring the non-Jewish world into the simcha, into the idea that there is going to be posterity for the idea of monotheism for us all. So let's look at the text 5. Page 83. It says, it's 83 and 84. When the Torah was given to the Jewish people, this is about Sinai. The Talmud tells us, when we stood at Sinai, and we got the Torah, a great sound was heard from one end of the world to the other. All the pagan kings trembled in their throne rooms and sang an ode to God, as it is written, in his chamber, everyone spoke of his glory. In other words, there was this awareness in the world, the Jews are receiving the Torah. They then gathered before Bilam, who was in the Torah, who was a non-Jewish and Jew-hating prophet, but who had spiritual sensitivity because he was a prophet. They went to him because he was a guy with spiritual sensitivity, the wicked soothsayer, and they asked him, "What is this incredible sound that we heard? What's going on? There's something going on we don't know. Obviously, before adequate communication, is the world being visited by a flood again?" He replied, "It is written, God sat enthroned at the flood. God sat as king forever. God swore they would never bring another flood to the world. What you hear is not the flood." They replied, "He might not bring a flood of water, but he might deluge the world with fire, as it is written, behold, God will contend with his adversaries with fires." So they say, "I'm not so sure something's happening." He goes, "What is it?" So Bilam replied, "God promised he would never destroy the world again." "What then is this terrible sound we all heard?" they asked. He replies, "God kept a hidden delight in his treasure room." In other words, conceptual treasure room for 974 generations before the world was created. Why 974 generations? That's not for here right now, but that's more of it's an illustrative number. He now seeks to give it to his children, as it is written, God will give strength to his nation. They immediately replied, God will bless his nation with peace. So this Jew-hating prophet says what happened is God gave the Jews a gift, the Torah, and so now they're happy. What does that have to do with them? The idea that we see there is that when we got the Torah, it was a message to the world through us. So the idea is that if I have a non-Jewish neighbor, and I care about my Jewish menu. Let's say I'm not a rabbi. I'm a computer programmer, but I care about. I want to keep kosher. I want to put on tefillin. I want to have mezuzahs, and I have a non-Jewish neighbor, and we're hanging out in the back. and we start to speak about God, just like I have a mitzvah of tefillin, just like I have a mitzvah of kosher, just like a mitzvah of mezuzah, I have a mandate from Torah to say, why don't you try going to church? Why don't you go back to church? That one didn't work. What about another? Not to lecture to them, but it's our job to help influence the world towards godliness. It was, even when the Torah was given, the Torah says, you keep Shabbos. That wasn't a message for the world. But the Torah had a message for the world. Shabbos is for me. But God and decency and non-cruelty to animals and maintaining a civil society is for my non-Jewish neighbor also. But not to do it just because they're good people, but to think that there's responsibility to God. That's the Jewish message.
So how do we differentiate what's meant for us and what's meant for the world?
We've got 613 mitzvahs. They don't want it. No, but there's 7 Noahide laws which go, and that is something. And I'll have a list at the end here, but that's what it is. It's that there's I don't think at least any true, like a fundamentalist Christian or a fundamentalist Muslim can sit here and say, you can be a Jew with your belief system, and you're still going to find, paradise from my perspective. No, it's either you do it or you don't. You didn't play by the rules. We're not letting you in. That's. I think that's the general attitude. Torah's is, you don't have to be Jewish. You have to be good. And part of good is believing that there's higher accountability. Not just good because you think it's good. Recognize that there's a higher authority, a creator, and you're responsible to God. And therefore, even at times when you really don't want to be good, recognize that's not about you. But it's only 7. Okay, we're going to get to that. Yeah. So if we take a look at text 6, all in these lines also. This goes back to Genesis. Genesis, they go through 6 days of creation, and after the first day it says it was morning, evening, and it was morning. One day, the evening, it was morning. 2 days, and then when it comes to 6th day, the language switches a little bit. It was evening, it was morning, the 6th day. Not 6 days, the 6th day. Why is 6th day preceded by a definite article, whereas the other 5 days appear without the definite article? What's the emphasis on the 6th day? So the Talmud tells us that the day of the month when the Torah was given, the day we celebrate Shavuot every year, is the 6th day of Sivan. So back in the beginning of creation, the day God created humanity, which was the 6th day of creation, say the 6th day, that the purpose of it all was the 6th day. Why does God create humanity? Why did God create a world? God created the world because God was going to create humans who would have the capacity to make these choices and make moral choices and be able to override their impulses, which are not necessarily in the most moral way. So the whole purpose of creation from Genesis, we're told it's all about humans following a code. Not just Jews, humans following a code. And that goes back to the 6th day of Sivan, when we got the Torah, to teach us that God made a covenant with the works of creation and said to them, after he creates his world, if the Jews accept the Torah on the 6th day of Sivan, you will exist. If not, I will return you to the primordial state of chaos and disorder. If we're not going to accept the Torah, if we're not going to lead a meaningful life, choose to lead a meaningful life, why does God need this whole exercise? The exercise was about us going through the struggle of life, making our mistakes, but also making good choices, which really validates the whole idea of the world as it exists. No, but this is what the rabbis are saying. God was forecasting. Exactly. In other words, anybody, they launch a project, there's a goal, an objective. When that first bang of creating matter. Why did God create it? Because God envisioned a world where there would be human beings who have free will and see themselves as distinct and don't automatically believe in God and don't see God, and they're going to choose through a world that pulls them to self-interest and doing things that they want, even if they're walking over someone else's comfort, and chooses to do the right thing. So it's about humans and about Torah. In other words, that there's a right and a wrong. Text 7a. If you have on page 86, this is from Maimonides in his book Code of Laws. He writes, those who accept these 7 commandments, which I will list at the end, and are scrupulous about their observance, are among the righteous Gentiles of the world and have a portion of the world to come. That's the way we see it. If I have a non-Jewish friend, and I do, and I see that they keep this, they believe in God and they keep their things, I'm putting a feeling they're not. I don't feel better than them. They are reaching who God created them to be, and I'm doing it a different way. We're all created by God, and we want to achieve the objective God laid out for us. However, this is only if they accept and fulfill them because God commanded so in the Torah. It's not to do it on a humanistic level. It's recognizing that they're God. And informed us through our teacher Moses that the descendants of Noah were previously commanded to keep them. So it's what we want to teach this Gentile is there's God, there's a Torah that we got from Moses, and that Torah is a message to the entire world, not just the Jews. But not for not for them to keep Judaism. Unless you want to call it 7 Noahide laws, it's not really. It's not. It's a program within the larger Torah mandate, I guess. Text 7b from the Rebbe. This can be explained according to the teaching of our sages that the entire creation was for the Jews and the Torah. This tells us that the Torah is not a late addition to the world. Rather, it's tied to the very existence of the universe. After the birth of the Jewish nation, the giving of the Torah, it is impossible that God would communicate to the world independently from the Torah and the Jews. Therefore, the observance of the Noahide code must be channeled through the Torah and the Jews. So while all of humanity is important from the moment of creation, humanity's ability to achieve their purpose comes through the Jews, because the Jews get the Torah and the Jews communicate the Torah. But that's ideal. Now we've taught it. Christianity has picked it up. Islam has picked it up. Hinduism has picked it up. Now the idea of them believing in God and living good lives, that's wonderful. And they themselves also talk about the Torah coming through Moses.
Okay, it says explicitly 7 commandments.
Correct.
Which are the 3 that he didn't include?
Oh no, it's separate. It's not about 10 commandments.
Okay.
It's not about 10 commandments. We'll read them soon. The commandments given to Jews are 613. It's a different thing than the 7. It's not just a difference in number. We'll get to that in a minute. This is why, if you look in text 8a, we find that the Talmud tells us before Isaac's birth, and this is the Rebbe saying it, but his parents had to change their name to reflect their new roles. Okay, before I read this to you, in the Torah portion that we read last week, this week, Abram became Abraham. Avram became Avraham. Added what's called the head, the H. Sarai became Sarah. But that is a name change. The Torah says, what's the difference between Avram? What does Avraham mean? You will be the father of a multitude of nations. Why a multitude of nations? Jews. The point was, and that's when he was able, that's after his bris and was able to give birth to Isaac, the idea was to impact a multitude of nations, not just the Jews. Sarai means my princess. Sarah means a princess over others. It's Sarah and Abraham. The Torah says it clearly. It was designed that they were supposed to be not just for the Hebrew Jew or Jewish people. They were supposed to be, they had a message for the world. Abraham became a father to the multitude, as the Torah tells us. And Sarah became a princess to all people. Before the birth of the Jewish people, in the person of Isaac, the first Jew, it had to be clear that Jews are the primary purpose of creation, in the sense that we are the ones, the channel for Torah to the world. And then the Talmud tells us something else, that on the day that Abraham weaned his son Isaac, 89, he made a grand celebration. All the nations gossiped and said, did you see the old man and woman who found the baby on the street, took him and claimed him for their own? Said, there's no way they had baby. There's no way. Not only that, but they threw a great party to affirm their claim. So our matriarch, our Abraham, went and invited all the generation's leaders, meaning the pagan leaders. And our matriarch Sarah invited their wives. Each of these women brought their own baby along, but did not bring their wetners, because that's what she asked. And a miracle occurred. Sarah's breasts opened like two well springs, and she nursed all the babies. What was that about? So Tech 8c says the Rebbe, this wasn't an additional miracle to the birth of Isaac. This was a continuation and result of the miracle of Isaac's birth. The miracle of his birth was never intended to be Abraham and Sarah's private affair. It was designed from the beginning as a global affair. Isaac was not born as the heir to the Hebrew people's monotheistic journey. Isaac's birth was a gift to all peoples, because he was going to spread his monotheism to everyone, Jew, Hebrew or non-Hebrew. For Isaac to be born, God changed his parents' names and made Abraham the father and Sarah the princess of the entire world. As a result, when the miracle occurred, it automatically impacted the whole world and everyone in it. The entire order of nations changed for all nations.
Rabbi Herson, can I ask a question? It's Lori.
You may.
So Isaac and Sarah, their struggle to have a child, and is that the reason why Isaac provided so much light to the world, whereas when Isaac was so much older, he had children, but it wasn't a struggle? That you mentioned that they were pagan children and they didn't necessarily provide the light to the world.
I think that's a fair comment, Lori. That isn't directly the message of what we're saying here, but I think that's an accurate takeaway. That Isaac, the clout, the strong impact that Isaac had on the world reflects somewhat the struggle that preceded his birth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Text 9. Father to the multitudes. The miracle continues. Page 91. The wonder and kindness that God showed Abraham when he fathered Isaac resulted in Abraham having six more sons with Torah. What does that tell us? For Jews to be God's ambassadors to the world, non-Jews need to sense a connection with Jews. When God extended the miracle by enabling Abraham to father non-Jewish nations, the nations realized that their primary purpose is intertwined with the Jews. And this is something that really should be in the Jewish mindset. We have lived, and the Rebbe spoke about it, I remember in 1983. He said, we've lived millennia, certainly many centuries, where we're running away from the non-Jew. And if they're not bothering us, we're not bothering them. If I can live as a Jew and no one's crashing into my house and taking me to prison, that's fine. I'm not going to tell them what to do. And it's a ghetto mentality, and we're entitled to it because we've been beaten so much. What the Rebbe was saying is that this is the United States. We can adjust to being who we're supposed to be, and that we do have a message for the world. Right now, as the world stays today, I don't think it's not the same world in my mind as it was when I was 15, because we just had we've just experienced this explosion, Jack in the Box of Jew hatred from October 8th on, and a million people voted for someone, a mayor of New York, where there's a very strong anti-Jewish thread going through that. I think that's undeniable. Well, not about him per se, but just the rhythm of it. But still, no. Our God willing, the United States remains the United States, remains a free society, and our responsibilities. I can speak to a non-Jew about, again, without lecturing them, I can speak to a non-Jew about finding God. And in most cases, that it's either they do or they don't, but it's not dangerous for me anymore. In Russia, 100 years ago, it wasn't advisable.
You may not like Mondami, but his first public utterance after the election was to condemn the defacing of a synagogue that was marked up with a swastika.
I'm glad he did that. And it's not about him so much as about what he represents. I saw a piece this morning from the Democratic Socialists of America, something a meeting they had last week, agenda items that they for Mandami. I think it was 9 items. They did not mention free food. They did not mention housing problems. All 9 were about how to attack Israel. So I'm not talking about him per se. I don't know him. He comes across friendly. His victory speech wasn't friendly. So I don't really, I don't live in New York, but I could tell you that the people, I think a lot of the people who pushed him into office, I mean, there was a swastika there in the crowd of his supporters. It happens. It's indicative to me.
Yeah. I mean, really, when you come right down to it, and this is straight out political statement, how can anybody vote for a molester? I mean, we have one in office already, or a fascist. I mean,
so I don't know.
Let's not talk politics.
Yeah, it's exactly. I think. I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. Sorry, I brought it up. But I think that when I brought it up was just the atmosphere we're living in as Jews, and it has changed. But I don't think it's. I think that we just keep. We still have this mandate to try to do our Jewish mission and bring monotheism to the world. So actually, what I'm going to do is here's a Noahide code. That's 7. Number 1 is a prohibition against idol worship, which is also seen as just a commandment to believe in God. A prohibition against illicit sexual relationships, which generally means like adultery. 3 is prohibition against murder. 4 is prohibition against theft. 5 is prohibition against blasphemy, like cursing God. The other one, 6 is prohibition against eating parts of animals while they're still alive, which translates, according to our rabbis, into prohibition against cruelty to animals. And number 7 is an obligation to establish courts of justice. If we're getting together and we're living in the Somerset Hills, we should make sure that there's some kind of a system. Someone's making sure that we're not killing each other, and that there's traffic lights and all of that. It's key points. The Jewish people are a standalone nation with clear lines that demarcate them from all other nations. Number 2, nonetheless, Jews are God's ambassadors to broadcast the ideals and values of Judaism to all people. Number 3, the purpose of creation was for Jews to teach the world the values of the Torah. Number 4, had Jews not accepted the Torah on Mount Sinai, God would return the universe to a primordial state of chaos and disorder. And number 5, accordingly, the birth of the Jewish people was not a private affair for Jews. It was a global celebration that would save and uplift them. So, if there are any questions, I deal with that. Yes, we have a question here. Say it again? Yeah.
If I understand correctly, the course of their life is aimed at the
7
hereafter.
should be. I mean, in a way, yeah.
You know, their prize is
Yeah, well, the
When
price
they-
is here and there, yeah.
when they go.
Okay.
I don't get the sense that this is the same for us. So
No,
what happens when we die?
also a higher life. That's definitely, we definitely believe in the soul that lives on after we pass away, for sure. The thing is, our goal should not be that we're living now to be able to have a palace in the future life. Our goal is to do today what God wants because we want to connect with God today. That should be the same for non-Jews. At the same time, because it's God's world and God, therefore there should be proper consequences for actions. We believe that as once we pass on, since mitzvahs are so cosmic and so much more for us, you give a poor person $1, you don't remember the next day. But according to Torah, it's wow, the fireworks, you just did a mitzvah. You light Shabbos candles, wow, it's incredible. So we don't see that here. When are we ever going to be able to experience the beauty of what we generated? See, that's when the soul moves on.
We don't believe in the heaven and the hell.
We do.
We do.
Yeah, of course.
Uh-oh.
No, so
We
the
believe in-
Torah, the Torah,
Oops.
they got it from us. But I wouldn't call it hell. The idea is that there is a journey of the soul to really to revisit the life led, and that's for the first year. One of the reasons I'm saying Kaddish for my parents now is because of the journey, but it's not. It's just because we all make mistakes, but we revisit our lives, and we see it from a perspective of truth, and there's a regret. Yeah, we appreciate the beautiful things, but we're trying to get rid of our schmutz of the. But then we're able to move on just into the eternal life. It's
Really?
cleansing. It's not punishment. It's cleansing.
Right. So it's not like you're condemned forever to hell.
We don't have such a thing. No,
No.
the Christians do.
Yes, I do.
That's where I'm going. Well, no.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, at least we have-
Where's the Leon? Yes, Leon. Leon, you asking?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I have one
problem.
question. The non-Jews have a divine soul minus Yehida, or just an animal soul?
They have. I wouldn't call it an animal soul. It's a natural soul. Yes, a
Natural soul, but no divine soul, not even up to higher.
So, but they must have. It's a great question, and I know you're coming from a little bit more of a spiritually sophisticated place on this. If non-Jews have free choice, which they do, because otherwise there wouldn't be reward consequences, then they must have some godliness in them. So it's there. There is there within the natural soul.
Oh, okay. Some
Okay.
sort of godliness. Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Be well. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.